Hello and welcome back to Knits by Lizzy. My name is Lizzy and this is my channel where I talk about all things knitting. I am very excited today to bring you my Everything I Knit in 2024 video. I honestly have been looking forward to filming this video ever since I started my podcast in August. So yeah, this is a highly anticipated video for me. And so if you are new here, welcome. It is really great to have you. I'll give you guys just a tiny bit of a background on me before I get started. Like I said, my name is Lizzy and I am finishing up my PhD in the sciences and I live in New Hampshire. It is a very chilly day here in New Hampshire. It is currently 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're gonna have a very cozy morning talking about knitting. And I started knitting in September of 2022. I learned how to knit just by watching YouTube videos, and I knit a bunch of hats for my family for Christmas that year. And then in 2023, I knit one sweater for myself, one sweater for my boyfriend, and then I knit a sweater for everyone in my family. And so I kind of used 2023 to step into garment knitting. And so this year, 2024, was the first year that I was primarily knitting for myself, and also the first year that I was consistently knitting where there was never a time when I didn't have anything on my needles. I always had at least one thing on my needles, usually 2 things on my needles at the same time. And so that's what I'm gonna talk to you guys about today. I started podcasting in 2024 as well, and I started podcasting in August of this year, which means that more than half of the finished objects that I have to show you guys actually have not been covered as finished objects on this podcast. Some of them have been covered as like what I'm wearing sort of things. And so there's gonna be a lot of new stuff here. So even if you've been following me for a while, I have some new things to tell you about today. So it's gonna be very exciting. I am also a vegan knitter, and so all of these garments that I'm gonna talk to you guys about, I've got a huge stack of them right here, are made with either acrylic or with a plant fiber. So bamboo or cotton or linen. In 2024, I finished 24 projects, and 18 of those projects were garments and 6 of those projects were accessories. Today, I am just going to tell you about 16 of those garments, and 15 of those I knit for myself, and 1 of them I knit for my boyfriend that I'm gonna go over today. And then I'm gonna go over one of my accessories that I knit today, and the other garments that I'm not gonna discuss were just gifted, so I don't have them. And then I think that there's really just like one main accessory that's not a gift knit that I think would be interesting to share, which is actually going to be the second thing I talk about today, which is going to be some mittens, some colorwork mittens that I knit. And so if you are interested in hearing about those 16 garments and 1 accessory that I knit, I invite you to grab your own project or a hot drink and just hang out with us as we talk about some knitting. So I am going to go in just chronological order, and I'm going to start with actually what I'm wearing, which is the first thing that I finished in 2024. This is the Porcelain Sweater, and this is by Lene Holme Samsoe. I think I'm butchering the pronunciation of her name. I am so sorry. And this is a very popular pattern by her. It's got, as you can see, these bands of color work, and the very classic colors for this sweater are the ones that she knitted in, which is just like a cream for the base and a blue, so that it looks like actual porcelain that you would buy, like a ceramic that you would buy. And I thought it was gorgeous for so long, and so when I finished all of my gift knits in 2023, I was so ready to cast on this sweater for myself, and this was my very first colorwork sweater. I knit the size extra small to small, and it took me 24 days to finish, and I finished this in January. So I actually cast it on in 2023, like December 29th or something. So the very, very end of 2023, but the vast majority of knitting this sweater was in January of 2024. And this was my very first colorwork sweater, which I think was really good for a first colorwork sweater because it's not completely all over colorwork. It's got these bands, and so you knit the colorwork and then you get kind of a break when you knit the stockinette. However, because this is a drop shoulder construction, when you knit this first panel of colorwork, you actually have to do colorwork on the right side and the wrong side, which I know just from reading the Ravelin comments were something that a lot of people were worried about. It is, I would say, slightly more tricky to work on the wrong side where you're purling your colorwork, but honestly, I didn't really find it that bad. It might be that I just didn't know any better because it was my very first colorwork sweater, so I wasn't like used to knitting colorwork stockinette because I'd never knit any colorwork before. But even as a completely brand new colorwork knitter, I was able to manage it, and it went okay. And so I just had an absolute blast knitting this sweater. I made 1 modification, which is just to add when I did my bind off. I did a tubular bind off where you do a few setup rows of double knitting before you do your like Italian sewn bind off, and I just did the setup rows, that double knitting, and the bind off in the contrast color. And so that you've got, just so you don't have so long of the main color before you're seeing the contrast color again on the sleeves. And then I also did it on the hem here. And I knit this out of Universal Yarns Uptown DK. It was the first time I had used it. I really, really liked using it. I would definitely use it again for a colorwork project because it's 100% acrylic, but it's got a huge color range. And so that's why I think it is especially good for colorwork projects. And it's just like a good basic DK weight acrylic. And I think that this cream color that I used for the main color, it is like a tiny bit shiny, which is something that I don't like about cream colored acrylic yarns, but it's not, especially worked up, it's really not so shiny where it's very much like, oh my god, you're wearing plastic. So I really like that about it. It is super duper soft. And I really like the fit. So not only was this my first colorwork project, this was also my first time doing a drop shoulder construction. I had done, I think, only raglans completely before I knit this. So this was my first time doing drop shoulder, which means I think this was my first time having to do like picking up for the collar and picking up for the sleeves and everything. So it was my first time doing, I think this was my first time where I had to like pick up stitches. And so there's definitely, on one of these shoulders, you can really see like a seam where I picked up stitches, but it's really not that bad. And it's a place where you'd like expect a seam. So I feel like it doesn't really look out of place. But I think that I could do a better job now. But I still absolutely love this sweater. I think it's one of my top sweaters that I knit this year, especially in the winter. I love wearing it. And I've gotten almost every single time I wear this sweater, I get compliments on it, which also feels really good because then you get to say, oh, well, thanks, I made it, which is the best thing to say as a knitter, as you all know. Yeah, absolutely loved this project. So also, since this was my first colorwork sweater, at first when I was knitting the body, I decided that I just like wasn't gonna catch floats, like, oh, that's not necessary. And there's actually in this leaf motif here in the middle, there is a part where you have like 18 stitches between your main color and your contrast color, which is like a ridiculously long float, and I didn't catch it. And then I think I was just kind of like intimidated by catching floats, so I thought it was gonna be too hard. And then I watched a few videos on it and I was like, oh, you just twist the yarn, like that's not very hard at all. And so when I got to the sleeves, I actually started catching the floats. And so I'm really glad I did that, because when I put on the sweater, I definitely in the body sometimes have like accidentally put my arm through that huge float or my hand through that huge float. And so I really wish that I had actually caught that float. I honestly don't think that like something that's like 5 stitches long is really like, I guess if you're making mittens or socks or something, it might be more, it might be better to catch a float, or like in the sleeves, somewhere where you might have like rings on and then get that caught. But something like 18 stitches definitely needs to be caught. But I think like everybody's got their own preferences on how long they think that it's okay to have a float before you catch it. So that is one thing about the sweater, is that I caught the floats on the sleeves, but I did not catch the floats on the body. All right, so next up in chronological order is the only accessory that I'm going to talk about today, and this is my Marit Mittens by Skeindeer that I knit. And I just used, as you can probably tell, I used the leftovers from my porcelain sweater to knit these. And I finished these in January, right after I finished my porcelain sweater, because I had a horrible case of the flu in January, and so these actually took me 2 days to knit. So I knit one in one day, and this in the next day, and it was all I did that day. Probably the worst case of the flu that I ever had. You'll see, because there's another project that was like a sick project. I was sick a lot last winter, and so knitting honestly was really helpful to kind of distract me from how bad I was feeling and make the time go by faster until I felt better again. And so these really helped take me through. They are I love them so much. They're so gorgeous. And I really think I just kind of caught the colorwork bug after I finished my porcelain sweater. I found it so fun, and these have come in handy so much. What I do is I just leave them in the pocket of my big winter coat, because if it's cold enough that I need my big winter coat, it's cold enough that I need these mittens. And so the primary use that these mittens get is shoveling the snow or scraping the ice off my car in the morning when I have to get up to go to work, because that happens a lot in the winter. Even if it doesn't snow, almost every day I have to scrape ice just from the car being warm when I drive it home at the end of the workday, and then it gets really, really cold out, and so then all that condensation from it being warm freezes, blah, blah, blah. And so I have to scrape the ice, and so having these mittens has been perfect for that purpose. So they have gotten a lot of use, so much so that I think I really would like to make another pair of colorwork mittens this year. We'll see. I mean, they're pretty quick to knit up, especially if you do DK weight. These are a DK weight pattern, and I love wearing them with my porcelain sweater because they match so well, because I just use the leftovers. So again, that yarn is the Universal Yarns Uptown DK. I believe I knit these on colorwork because I don't think I had my shorties yet. I now have a complete set of shorties from Knit Picks that I purchased at some point this past year, but I think I didn't have them yet, so I'm fairly certain I knit these on Magic Loop, which is not my favorite, which is why I bought the shorties. But yeah, I think I knit these on Magic Loop. Obviously you would need Magic Loop no matter what, or DPNs or something for the thumb. Yeah, it was a really fun construction. I had never made mittens before, so I really enjoyed doing it. So those are the Marit Mittens by Skeindeer. Okay, so next up is my April cardigan by Petite Knit, and I finished this in February, and it was on the needles for 43 days. I knit this out of Barocco Comfort DK. So before I knit this, I had purchased the Barocco Comfort sock version, which is the fingering weight version of Barocco Comfort, which is a 50-50 acrylic and nylon blend, and I thought it was really, really soft, and so I wanted to try working with the DK weight version of it, and so that's what I knit this April cardigan out of, was Barocco Comfort DK, and I knit size extra small. I should have knit a size small based off of my bust, but in my gauge swatch, my gauge was larger than the pattern, and so I thought by knitting an extra small, I would get probably in between a size extra small and small. In hindsight, I think my gauge wasn't as off in the actual garment. I think I actually tend to be looser in my swatches than I am in the actual garment, which is, I mean, this is knitted flat, of course, because it's a cardigan. This is a very popular cardigan pattern by Petite Knit, and so it's knitted flat, and so there shouldn't be any issue between gauge discrepancies between knitting a swatch flat and then knitting a project in the round, but my gauge was looser in the swatch, and so I should have knit a small. The extra small still fits, it's just very fitted, and I knit it cropped. I think it's so cute, and I do get a lot of wear out of this. Just the fit is just so good. It all worked out in the end, but I do want to knit another one of these in the 2025 and knit a small and then do it in a different color. This is the color Sage, but I think I want to make a gray black one. And so I made one modification to this besides the little bit of cropping, and that is I did a double knit button band instead of a ribbed button band. And this is a very common modification to this pattern. I honestly think that like 1/3 or more of the Ravelry projects for this pattern have this modification, so this was definitely something that I saw a lot of people doing and thought it looked really, really good, and so I wanted to try it. And I thought that I just think that double knit button bands, in my opinion, look a lot better than ribbed button bands. I prefer their look. And there was a little tutorial that Handmade by Florence Miller had put on YouTube that I used to teach myself how to do it, and then I also looked at another tutorial by Katova Kika, so Veronica Lindberg. Each of those knitters had made these tutorials for other patterns, but I just watched their video and kind of applied it to the Petite Knit April cardigan pattern, and I was a bit intimidated by doing a double knit button band because everyone seemed to talk about how long they take and how they're like a labor of love because the result is so amazing, but they take so long. And they do take a long time, but I really enjoyed watching this really squishy thing like appear in front of me, and I loved how it looked, and actually found the process like very meditative. And so I actually enjoyed the process, and so I am very happy making double knit button bands. And I had one other project that I did a double knit button band on, but it was actually one of my gifted garments, so I'm not going to go into it today. So on this project are some very cheap buttons that I think I just got at like Michael's for like $1 or something. I think that it worked out really well, even though that they're cheap buttons. I think they look nice. The kind of brown on the green, I think it looks nice. And I sewed them on using the yarn, and I believe that I kind of like pulled the yarn apart so that I could get, and so yeah, I get a lot of wear of this project, so much so that I'm gonna make another one in 2025. So my next finished object I also finished in February, and it took me 7 days to knit. This is the zipper sweater by Petite Knit, and I actually followed the zipper sweater man pattern and just modified it to fit my size. And this was my other sick project. That's why it took me only 7 days, because I got COVID right after I had the flu. I got the flu, and then I was well for about like 3 or 4 days, and then I got COVID. It was really bad. But these came out of it. So this was, this is a very oversized zipper sweater. And so I followed the Zipper Sweater Man pattern and just cast on for the small size. But even the small size wouldn't fit me because my gauge was larger than the pattern suggested. I knit this out of Line brand Heartland in the color Wolf Trap, which is, at least this color of Heartland, is a worsted weight, because I have found that depending on, maybe it's the lot actually, but sometimes I get Heartland yarn by Line brand that looks more like a DK, and sometimes it's more like a worsted. I don't know why. I don't know if it depends on the color, because the discrepancy between those two that I've experienced was different colors, or it might be the lot. I don't know. But I have this, I had this pink color from this pink color of Heartland from Line brand in my stash, and so I was sick, needed to knit something. I already had this pattern, I already had the yarn, and so I knit this pattern. It really flew by. It's really fun. I mean, like, I've knit 4 of these because I knit 3 of them in 2023 for the men in my family. So I knit one for my brother, my stepdad, and my boyfriend. And so I'm probably not gonna make this pattern again. That's enough for me. So this is the zipper sweater that I made out of the Zipper Sweater Man. And so this pattern is really, really great. The only annoying thing, I mean, it's just basically a raglan with like a very fun double folded chunky collar. It's just really fiddly to put in zippers, and so honestly that's like the main thing preventing me from knitting another zipper sweater of any kind in the future, just because I really disliked putting in the zipper. There's instructions and videos out there, and there's instructions and videos on Petite Knits website. I just don't like sewing, and you have to like legit sew it down, like with an actual sewing needle and sewing thread. And mine, I just feel like it's kind of sloppy. Like, oh yeah, like this is a big, I really need to fix this. I didn't sew it down the very top of this properly. The knitting of this project is really fun, but I find the zipper installation to be very fiddly, that I didn't like. But the result is very, very cute, and it feels very, especially if you install the zipper properly, it feels very like professional to have like a zipper in your sweater that feels like, oh wow, you really could just like buy that at the store, which is a very cool feeling. So I do recommend this pattern. I like this pattern, but I just don't like putting in zippers. Okay, so the next finished object is the Arctic Light Sweater by Veronica Lindberg. So she is Katova Kika on all social media, and she's got a lovely YouTube channel. And this is an all-over cabled raglan sweater. I finished this in March, and this was the second time that I had knit this sweater. I knit one in 2023 for my mom, and I loved it so much. I loved knitting it so much, and I loved how it looked so much that I wanted one for myself. And this took me 40 days to knit. I knit it out of Brava Recycle, which is a very thin DK weight acrylic yarn from Knit Picks. I believe I knit this in color Maple, and because the yarn was thinner than what the pattern calls for, I think the pattern calls for more like a worsted weight, so I was knitting way below gauge for this sweater in terms of I was too tight in my gauge. And so I actually cast on for a medium, even though the size of this is more like a small. And so that was like one modification, I guess, that I made. And then the other modification that I made is that I've noticed when I knit my mom's sweater is that I don't think that the sleeves are really proportional to the body for the sweater. The sleeves are more oversized than the body, I think. And so I stopped increasing for the sleeves in the chart before I stopped increasing for the body. And so I think I did I think I did the suggested number of body increases for size medium, but then I knit, I think, the suggested number of increases for size extra small for the sleeves, so quite a few less stitches in the sleeves. And I think the proportions turned out really well. I like how the sleeves look, and so I'm glad that I did that. But yeah, this is just an overall really gorgeous pattern. I actually really highly recommend this for your first cabled pattern. And so the first time I knit this, it was the first time I'd ever knit cables. And like I said, Veronica Lindberg has a YouTube channel, and so she actually has like step-by-step videos, three full videos on the process of knitting this entire sweater. And so she goes through every single one of these cables, and there's a lot of different cables. So there's like the center braid, and then there's this like wrapped around bobble one. I had never made bobbles before, so she tells you how to make a bobble. And then there's this kind of, what would you call this, like a fishbone looking cable. And then there's a cable in the raglan. And then one thing I really like about this pattern also is that the sleeves cables are different than the body cables, and so you're not going to get like bored of doing the same cable over and over again after knitting like all of the body, and then you have to move to the sleeves and it's just the same cable. So there's a new cable that's only on the sleeves, this kind of another twisty braid-esque like cable with twisted rib. So it definitely is a pattern that one you need to like kind of focus for. Obviously you eventually memorize the cable repeats because you're doing them so much, but it's still engaging even though you're doing the same cables over and over again because there's so many different cables. So when you get to a cable round, you've got lots of things to do. And so I found it really, really engaging. Like I didn't get tired of doing this sweater until maybe like halfway through the second sleeve when I was like, okay, I think I'm done doing cables. But like that's a lot of cabling to do before you get tired of doing cables. And so this sweater was just really, really fun. And the only downside I think to this pattern is that there's no short row shaping, and so there's no raising of the back neck. If I were to make this pattern again, or if you are interested in making this pattern, I do recommend adding short rows. I have no idea how to add short rows to a pattern that doesn't already have them. I might be able to figure out now that I've done so much knitting this past year, but I think probably the easiest thing to do would just be to add them into the collar so you're not messing up the cabled, because you do start with knitting the collar and then you sew it down, or you can sew it down afterwards. But one easy thing to do would just be to have the short rows like in the ribbing, and so you have like a higher ribbing in the collar on one side and less on the other. I would just follow short rows from another sweater that I have or something if I was going to do this one again. But yeah, that's the one caveat to this sweater. But on the other hand, if you don't like short rows, or if you are a newer knitter and you don't want to do short rows, this pattern doesn't have them. And it's still like, it still fits fine. Like I wear it a lot, but it just probably would fit a teensy bit better if it did have short rows. Okay, so my next sweater that I finished is also a finished object from March, and this is the Terrazzo Sweater by Petite Knit. It is a turtleneck sweater made out of twisted rib, and then it also, the construction is it's got, what would you call that, like contiguous? It's where you've got those like panels on the shoulder. And I think this is the same construction that the April cardigan is in. I believe that's why I chose this sweater, because I really like how the April cardigan fits. It's like a very fitted, tailored look, and I liked that, so I wanted to try that in the Terrazzo. And then the other reason why I wanted to knit the sweater is because I really wanted to play with the kind of speckling look, and her sample is knit out of like a tweedy kind of yarn, and so I knit this out of Brava Speckle, which is a Knit Picks yarn. It's a 100% acrylic and it's a worsted weight. A lot of their Brava is a DK weight, but the Brava Speckle is a worsted, pretty thick worsted as well. And I don't have recorded when I started this project. I only have that I finished it towards the end of March. And so I think I finished it like right before Easter. So it's kind of became my Easter sweater. And I think that the yellow is a very spring color, which is good for Easter. But I think that this took me about 3 weeks to knit, which is my average to knit like a stockinette sweater. Yeah, I think it was pretty quick just because it was mainly stockinette. The turtleneck definitely took a long time. These turtleneck, it's in twisted rib, and there's a lot of knitting to make a turtleneck. So that took a bit. I haven't actually worn this that much for 2 reasons. One is that I go back and forth about whether I actually like the turtleneck on this sweater. However, when I was filming all this try-it-on footage that you guys are seeing, and like looking back at the footage, I was like, oh, that turtleneck actually looks pretty cute. It looks very cozy. So I might actually bring this out more this winter, because the sweater is very, very warm because of the worsted weight yarn plus the turtleneck. So it's actually perfect for the season that I'm in right now, where it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit out. So I should really pull this out more this winter. Also because I finished it towards the end of March, it really wasn't that cold. Like it was still kind of chilly here at that time, but you're just about to enter, about May is when it starts getting warmer, and so there wasn't really that much time to wear it anyways. And so now I think entering winter I'll be able to wear it more. And the other thing that has been kind of preventing me from wearing this a lot is the color. And so like I said, I really wanted to get that kind of speckly look that, I don't know, that's just like all the like cool girl knitters make. And so I was trying to find like a good speckled acrylic yarn that didn't look so childish, and so I landed on these colors, but I don't know if I like it. I still think it looks kind of like a color that you would make a child's sweater in. Now that I know a little bit more about what non-animal fiber yarns are out there, I do now know that there are some hand dyers that just work with cotton, and so if I wanted to really get that speckled look, I might have to splurge on some nice hand-dyed cotton yarn and then make a sweater like this. We'll see if I do that. Maybe I'll like request yarn like that for a birthday or something. Especially if I found like a fingering weight pattern, I would probably only need like a skein or two to make a sweater, and so that would bring down the cost, because those skeins are like $30 a skein. It's really, that's like, I can't really do that. So that was really what I was going for with this sweater, and I didn't really achieve it, but the colors are very bright. Like if it's really like a dreary day in winter, it might be fun to wear this sweater. And then like I said, it is really warm. And so yeah, that's where we're at with the Terrazzo Sweater by Petite knit in Brava Speckle. And it took me about 3 weeks to knit, I think, and I finished it in March. Okay, so next up is a finished object from April that took me 26 days to knit. I knit size extra small, and this is the Oslo Sweater by Petite Knit, and this is a just basic drop shoulder sweater that calls for, I believe it calls for a fingering and a mohair held together, and I just knit this out of a DK weight yarn held single. The yarn that I knit this out of was Hobby Amigo, and this was the first time I had used this yarn. This is a Hobby Amigo, if you haven't heard me chat about it on this channel already, is a 100% acrylic, high bulk acrylic from Hobby in a DK weight, and it's the softest thing that I have like ever felt. And when I washed this in the washer and then dried it on the low heat setting in the dryer, the drape that happened after that was just absolutely incredible. And so this is a really lightweight, really soft, kind of like workhorse DK weight acrylic that this is the first time I used it. After I used it for this sweater, I just like absolutely fell in love with it and have used it several more times. So yes, this is just a basic drop shoulder sweater, and I wanted to knit this because I really enjoyed the fit of my Porcelain Sweater, which is a drop shoulder sweater. And actually, until I knit this Oslo Sweater, I didn't knit another drop shoulder sweater after the Porcelain Sweater, and so I wanted another drop shoulder sweater that I could wear, but that wasn't so, like, this Porcelain Sweater is one that's a little bit like thicker than that Oslo Sweater, and so it's a bit warmer. But then also, I feel like the porcelain design on this, it feels very winter to me, maybe just because it's blue and white. And so I don't know, it's not exactly themed, but this doesn't say spring to me or fall to me. I really like wearing this sweater in winter. And so I wanted a slightly more basic version of a drop shoulder sweater, and so that's where this came in. And I was actually knitting this during the eclipse, which was kind of fun, that happened this year. And yeah, this really just flew by. Like I said, I guess it took me 26 days to knit. Love the yarn. It's so easy to throw on. Love the fit. Highly recommend it. Yeah, basically just like a really good basic. And I could see myself just like falling back on this pattern because I already own it. Whenever I just want a drop shoulder sweater, I don't see a reason to buy a different drop shoulder construction sweater that is just like a basic one like this if I want another just basic drop shoulder sweater. So yeah, a very successful project, I think. Okay, so my next project, which I actually finished in May, is my Cardigan No. 6 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I knit this out of Hobby Fluffy Day. I knit size extra small, and this was on my needles for 48 days, which is definitely a long time for me. I wasn't knitting on it for the entirety of those 48 days. I had put it aside at some point because I kind of got tired of it. This project overall was not a good project for me. So the only good thing about this project, before I get into the negatives, is the buttons that I used. And so these are some very cool metal buttons that have like lions on them that my younger sister got for me in New York City. I think they're really, really cool. I really, really like them. Definitely the best part of this whole sweater. And I also like the color of the sweater, but I don't really like the yarn that I use for this sweater, and I don't really like I didn't really like the pattern for the sweater, so bad all around. So like I said, this is Cardigan No. 6 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I really did not like the way that the pattern was written. I found it very confusing when it's really not that complicated. I mean, there's like lace, but you follow one chart. It's really not that complicated of a sweater. But I still found it very confusing the way that it was written, and there's no shaping to raise the back neck in this sweater. In this pattern. I found it was one of those things where it's like at the times that I needed more information, there was not enough information given, and the times that I didn't need that information, there was too much information given. And the button band was supposed to be knit separately, I think, and then sewed on, which one I didn't really want to do sewing to put it on. And I found those instructions really confusing, and then I was looking at other people's Ravelry comments, and a lot of people agreed with me about the button band, that they really had no idea what was going on. So I ended up not doing what she suggested, and this kind of looks like a double knit button band, but that's not what I ended up doing. I wanted to just be like done with this project, so double knitting was going to take too long for me. I kind of knit it similar to the way that you knit double knit button band, where you pick up all of the stitches on one side and then you cast on new stitches here, and then you like slowly add those extra stitches like as you go up. But instead of doing double knitting where you're like slipping every other stitch and doing it twice for each row, I just did ribbing. So I only had to do each row once, and then I just was knitting together when I was adding the button band like to the sweater. I knit together at on the right side row twice. So I was knitting together once for the right side and once for the wrong side. I just did it both on each right side. So when I got to the wrong side, there was no knitting together, and on the right side, there was knitting together twice. So in the end, it ended up being knitting together once for every row, I like average in the end. And so in the end, it didn't really like stretch out very much. So I actually think it looks like double knitting, even though it's not, which is nice. And it was faster than double knitting, and I didn't have to figure out a new button band construction that I was just, I guess at the time that I was knitting this, just wasn't prepared to learn new things or something. So I didn't really enjoy the pattern, and it kind of like turned me off from knitting my favorite things knitwear patterns. Also, I think I had fairly high expectations for the pattern because she is such a big designer. And so I was expecting the pattern to be really well written. And it wasn't doing it for me. And so yeah, it has steered me away from my favorite things knitwear pattern. So after this pattern, I haven't knitted any others from her, and I don't really plan to, especially when there's so many other designers out there, that I could knit from. So, yeah, that was just my personal opinion, my personal experience, with this pattern. I know a lot of people really like her pattern. So my other thing about this sweater is the yarn. So I knit this in Hobby Fluffy Day, and I think I just chose the wrong, part of this is that I just chose the wrong yarn for this pattern. So I wanted to the pattern calls for mohair, and I at the time had not discovered, which I'll talk about later, that there is in existence a vegan mohair that's made out of acrylic and polyester, but at the time I didn't know about that yarn, and so this pattern calls for mohair, and the closest thing I could find was this Hobby Fluffy Day, which is very fluffy the way that mohair is. However, it's a worsted weight yarn, and the pattern calls for 3 lace weights held together, and so I thought, that might be close to a worsted. It's not. I think 3 lace weights held together would be kind of maybe like a DK, because 2 lace weights I think gives you a fingering, and then if you hold fingering and lace together, that gives you a DK, and so really this should have been knit on more like a DK yarn, and it's supposed to be mohair, so it's supposed to be like really, really light and airy and oversized, and I think maybe I should have gone like up a size. I knit the size, let's see, I have it written down here. I knit the size extra small. I think maybe I should have written in a small, and then I also cropped it too. Like I said, I was just kind of done with this pattern, and I cropped it too, and so the fit is like not really what I love anyways, and the kind of just like whole vibes of the sweater isn't what I wanted to get either. So honestly, like maybe part of my dislike of the pattern could be influenced by that I chose the wrong yarn, so like that's on me, not on the pattern. So there's a little bit of like an asterisk there. But yeah, so I think if I was gonna knit this again, which I'm not going to, I would now knit it in Lamy Yarn Soft Sensations, which is like a legit vegan mohair, and I think that's really what this pattern needed. So yeah, probably my biggest like fail. I mean, I completed the project, it's fine, but probably my worst project of the year, to be honest, in terms of how I feel about it. And it's such a shame because I've got these really special buttons on it. So one thing I might do is, if I knit another cardigan in this coming year or at any other time that I find myself wearing more than this one, what I might do is move these special buttons to that cardigan that I'm wearing a lot more, and then just add different buttons onto this cardigan. I really don't know what color of buttons would be good for this. Maybe some like with some brown, like light brown toggle buttons look good with this like red color. I don't know, maybe. I don't really know what other buttons to do. Maybe just other gold buttons or something. But yeah, that's my cardigan number 6 by my favorite things to knitwear. Okay, so now we're going to move into my summer knits, which are mainly t-shirts and 1 tank top. And the first one that I finished in May, and it is the Seaside Tee by Cheryl Mogatari. And I knit this out of Santa's Garn Lene, which is like a DK worsted cotton cotton, linen, and viscose blend by Santa's Garn. Super popular. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. When I knit this t-shirt, it was my first time using a yarn like that I'd seen other knitters using, like on podcasts, on Instagram and stuff. And so I was really excited to use this yarn. It is expensive, definitely more expensive than the other projects I have knit, so it's not something that I'm like gonna do all the time, but it was fun to be able to use a yarn that so many other people had used. So I finished this in May, and it took me 31 days to knit. The finished product is very, very soft. This is another contiguous sleeve construction, I believe, and clearly it's got a bunch of stripes, which were very, very addictive and very fun to like play with colors of the Santa's Garn Lene. The finished object feels really, really good to wear on your skin because it is a t-shirt. It is going to go like right next to skin, and so I am absolutely in love with the finished object. However, knitting with Lene, I found it super, super splitty, so that like wasn't very fun, and I don't even use metal needles or anything. Like I knit with wooden needles, so if you were knitting with Lene and metal needles, it probably would be even worse. But yeah, I didn't find that the knitting experience with Lene was very good, but the end result is so good that it's worth it, I think. It's worth it, I think, honestly, for the price and for the knitting experience. I am curious what Drops Belle is like, because that's the same exact composition as Santa's Garn Lene, but it is much cheaper. So if you have used Drops Belle and Santa's Garn Lene before, please let me know what your opinion is on the difference between those two, and if you find Drops Belle to be like similar enough to Santa's Garn Lene to not justify buying the higher price Santa's Garn Lene instead. So this summer I might try Drops Belle just so that I can see the comparison. And if Drops Belle stands up to Santa's Garn Lene, I think I'll probably buy the lower expensive version. So this was my first t-shirt that I'd ever made myself, and so it's very fun that I obviously could wear this a lot during the summer, but I actually can wear it a lot now because there are times when I double up on the knits and I wear a knit t-shirt and then I wear like a sweater over it in the fall and winter, so that's really, really fun. My only like gripe about this finished object is that it's cropped. I like decided to crop it. And it does fall like right below my high-waisted jeans, so it all works out and I still wear it and it is wearable. However, I think it would be even more wearable if I added like 1 or 2 more stripes before I did the ribbing, because sometimes it shows just like a tiny bit of skin, which doesn't make me feel the most comfortable like at work and stuff. So, and then also I can't tuck it in to my jeans, which I like to tuck in my t-shirts, so I wish I had done like 1 to 2 more stripes, but it's still a very successful finished object that I wear all the time. So my next summer knit is another t-shirt, and this is the Poet Tee by Sari Nordland, and I finished this in July, and it took me 29 days to knit. I knit size 3 because I had some gauge issues where my gauge, because of the yarn that I was using, this calls for a worsted and I was using more like a DK, thin DK, my gauge was a lot more stitches for 10 centimeters, and so I had to go up to size 3 in order to get a fit of about size 1, and I knit this in Barocco Modern Cotton DK, which is a blend of cotton and viscose, bamboo blended together. It's so like silky feeling. I really highly recommend this yarn. I really, really liked it, and they've got pretty good color range. I bought this at Webb's, America's Yarn store, which is in Massachusetts, an amazing store. If you are in any sort of driving distance to Webb's, I really highly recommend you go there. Me and my friend went down to Webb's, I think last May, and that's where I bought like all of my summer yarns, and so I only had to buy, I think I made a purchase at Webb's, and then I didn't buy yarn again until like August or September after I was done knitting with all of my summer knits, which was very fun. Like I said, I finished this in July. You may have noticed that the previous finished object was in May. In June, what I finished was gifted, and so I don't have it. And then also this was cast on in June, but finished in early July. So I actually spent a lot of June knitting this. And so as you can see, it's this really gorgeous lacy pattern that is just like kind of like a basic raglan construction. There is some shaping to raise the back neck a little bit, and I modified this pattern slightly by adding a I-cord for the collar instead of ribbing, and then also instead of ribbing on the sleeves, I did double folded, just like stockinette hems, double folded hems. I really like how they look. I'm very happy with them. And then I did the suggested ribbing on the bottom. But I had so much fun knitting this. I am so proud of it whenever I wear it. I think it looks so pretty, and I feel so good in it, and I really like the length that I knit it to, because because this is kind of like holy, I do have like a nude color tank top that I bought specifically for this t-shirt and to wear underneath it. But I love wearing this. Love wearing this t-shirt. I love how this yarn feels. Overall, just like an amazing pattern by Sari Nordland. So I found that this pattern, because it is so complicated, I did need to have the chart, looking at the chart with me at all times, and so I had to look at the chart every single row, but I didn't have to look at it for every single stitch. So at the beginning of the row, I could see what the repeat was gonna be, and then that was easy enough to memorize for the rest of the entire row, and then the next row I would have to look at the chart again. And it did get to a point where it became intuitive, where I had a feeling of what the next row would be, or like I could guess what the next row would be, but I still would look at the chart every single row to make sure that I was on the right track. And so it was a very engaging knit, but it wasn't so difficult that it took away from the enjoyment of it. So I really highly recommend all of her Poet patterns. She has several different versions of Poet. Like I think she's got a tank top version, and she definitely has a pullover version, 2 different types of pullover versions. So one where you've got the lace on the sleeves and all over the whole body, and then I think she's got a version where it's kind of like this t-shirt where it's like the lace on the body and then the sleeves are stuck in it. I think that she's got a sweater version that's kind of like that. And I enjoyed making this lace design so much that I think I might make the pullover version of the Poet sweater where it's got lace on the sleeves too for my mom next year. And I will knit that, if I do knit that, I'll knit it out of a fingering and like a lace weight mohair held together. But we'll see, I need to talk to my mom, but that's like kind of brewing in my mind to make, just because it's so gorgeous. And it really wasn't that, like I was saying, it really wasn't that hard. Like it's engaging. You have to look at the chart every row, but it's like, it's doable. It's definitely doable. And I really hadn't knit that many lace patterns. Like the Cardigan No. 6 was the first time I had done any sort of lace. So this is my second time doing lace, and it's really like, it's just yarn overs or knitting things together is really what lace is. In various combinations. So as long as you're paying attention, like you can knit lace. Yeah, I think it's one of those, it's another one of those really cool things about knitting where I think that this looks very impressive when you see it, but it's actually not that difficult to knit in reality. Like if you just break it down to the basic stitches, it's really not that hard to knit. So yeah, very pleased with this project. So my final t-shirt of the year is this Moonset Tee by Ozetta, and I finished this in August, and it took me 26 days to knit, and I actually knit this out of the same yarn as the Poet Tee, which is Barocco Modern Cotton DK. So again, that's a blend of cotton and viscose together, but clearly a different color. I knit size small, and this was knit on 3mm needles. The Barocco Modern Cotton DK is a very thin DK. I think it's more like a sport weight, and so this pattern, I believe, actually called for a fingering weight, but I was able to get away with knitting it with a DK weight yarn. The construction of this is so fun. It's a drop shoulder construction, but the collar is obviously, you have this like ribbed v-neck collar that overlaps one another, and I found the construction of that really just fun and super engaging, and I really liked this pattern, and I think that her patterns in general must be really good. And this is my first time knitting an Ozetta pattern. I haven't knit one since, but I plan to. She's got quite a few just like really basic patterns. I've looked at the Miles shirt jacket before, just like a really big oversized cardigan, but she also has other just like basic drop shoulder or raglan sweaters, and I might be venturing into that in 2025 because I found knitting this to be so, like the pattern writing style and the way everything was explained and this construction was so fun. I just think that that she's just like a really good pattern designer, I think. So the only thing about this is, like I said, it was knit on 3mm needles, and so it felt like the body took forever, but actually I knit it in 26 days. So that's actually not so bad. Like that's not really long, like just a little bit over 3 weeks. So, but I do recall that when I was knitting it this summer that it did kind of like drag on in the body. But I didn't crop it, so that's good. I knit it to a really good length to tuck in, and I wear this this is probably the most worn t-shirt of the 3 t-shirts. This is my most worn t-shirt, probably because I knit it to a good length and because it's a little bit more basic than the Poet Tee. So absolutely loved this project. I did make one modification to to the project, which I don't actually remember. I think maybe it's I-cords. I think the pattern calls for I-cord finishings, but I did all my finishings as double folded hems, which I think look really, really good. I'm really happy. I guess I keep showing you the wrong side of the work, I think. I'm really happy with how they turned out. So yeah, overall, very successful pattern, I think. Okay, so my final summer knit of the year was my only tank top of the year, and it was the Sailor Swift top by Kitova Kiko or Veronica Lindberg. And I also finished this in August, and it only took me 7 days to knit, so it is so quick. Obviously it's very fitted because it's a tank top, so I think it's got negative ease, and I knit the first size. I think that is probably what would be suggested for my bust, but also I didn't have very much yarn to knit this, so I knit this out of my leftovers from my Poet Tee and my Moonset Tee that I just showed you. And so this is, again, Barocco Modern Cotton DK in those two colors left over. And I think my limiting factor was actually the blue contrast color that I was leftovers from my Moonset Tee, because I think I started with the same amount of yarn for both my Poet Tee and my Moonset Tee, but you can tell that there's obviously a lot more fabric for the Moonset Tee. So I was limited by my little stripes here, and I ended up running out. So this was super duper cropped. As you can see, you'll see from the tried on footage that it was super duper cropped, and I would never have set out to intentionally make a garment that cropped, or like I would never buy anything that cropped, but because of Yarn Chicken, I ended up with something that cropped. But I think this is so cute. It's such a cute little top, and I think it's really good for like going out or something, or like when you want to be a little sassy. It's really good for obviously like a really, really warm summer day. I got a little bit of wear out of this, but I finished it like mid-August, and so I think I didn't like go out to the lake very many times after I finished it. So I think that this is gonna get a lot more wear in 2025 when I already have it for like the whole summer. So I'm excited for that. And this pattern is amazing, amazing. Probably the honestly best tank top pattern out there. The stripes are super, super addictive, but even if you knit it in just like one color, I think it's still amazing. And I'll tell you why. So I have knit two other tank tops. In 2023, I knit two other tank tops. One I gifted to a friend, and one I knit for myself. And the one I knit for a friend, I knit top down, which obviously top down is when you can really control the length of things. I think it's a lot easier to control the body circumference of things too, because you can just stop your increasing, I mean, depending on what construction is, but like often you can, like for example for a raglan, you can stop increasing once you get to the circumference that you want. So that's a huge positive for top down, and I prefer to knit things top down. But I think a lot of top down tank tops, like the one that I had knit previously, are so fiddly, where you often have, I think in order to get the right shaping or something, I don't know, you often have, like you start with multiple pieces that you have joined together once you get into the round. And so you have like, often you'll have like provisional cast-ons, or you'll have to like, maybe not sew things together, but you have to combine all the pieces together when you get to knitting in the round. And that was like, I did it, it's possible, it's fine, but it's not like the most fun thing to do. But then the other tank top I had knit, which is like kind of the other main option, is to knit the tank top bottom up. And so if you knit it bottom up, you're able to just like separate instead of having to add things when you get to the yoke part of the tank top. And I find that doing that is a lot easier than doing all the fiddly parts of a top-down sweater, but then you're knitting it bottom up, and there's always the question of, have I knit this long enough? I think it's way harder to tell from something that's bottom up, like what the yoke depth is gonna be, and so you don't really know how long to knit things. So that's like the main reason why I prefer to knit things top down. So with bottom up, you don't get the length, but it's less fiddly, and with the top down, it's more fiddly, but you do get to adjust the length. This is best of both worlds, because the way that this is constructed, it is not very fiddly at all. You like start with the back panel, and then it's kind of like, I guess kind of like drop shoulder, where you start with the back panel, and then you pick up stitches, and then you knit the front panel, and then you join under the round, and then you join in the round, and you knit the rest. And so that's not very fiddly at all, and it's still top down, so you can adjust the length very, very easily. The fit that is generated from this is so, so good. And she has a unique way of adding an I-cord. There's like one little part of this I-cord that you'll have to buy the pattern if you want to see it, but that I think makes it lay really, really well. And so just wow, all over, amazing, amazing pattern. I 100% am going to be knitting more of these this coming summer because, like I said, this is super, super cropped, so I kind of want some that I can actually tuck into pants and that are going to be a lot more wearable. So the stripes on this are so fun. I think I'll probably knit one other striped version with just some like leftover cotton yarn that I have from like 2022 when I very first started knitting, and I was just like buying random yarn and then I didn't really know what to do with. So I have some leftover yarn that I could use for that, but then also I kind of want just like some solid versions of this that would be good layering pieces or just like good for summer when it's warm out. So I highly, highly recommend the Sailor Swift top by Veronica Lindberg. The fit is so, so good, and the like knitter experience is really, really good. So overall, really good project. Let me make sure that I got all of the stats on here. Finished it in August. It took me 7 days. The pattern is by Veronica Lindberg, and I knit size 1 out of Barocco Modern Cotton DK, the leftovers from my Poet Tee and my Moonset Tee. Okay, so now we are moving into the fall knitting, and to start off with the fall knitting is what I finished in September, and this is the Billie Pullover by Sari Nordland, and I knit size 4 for my boyfriend. You can see how big this is. So it is an all-over cabled raglan sweater that has mainly honeycomb cables in the center here, and then also a couple twisty ones, and there is even a cable like in the raglan stitches themselves, which is like really cool. And then of course, like most cable designs, there's moss stitch everywhere else. And so like I said, I knit size 4 for my boyfriend, but I ended up, after having him try it on a little bit, increasing a little bit more once I got to the end of the yoke increases. So this is really more like a size 4.5, and then my boyfriend is around 6 feet tall, and so I lengthened the sweater by a lot, and then I also lengthened the sleeves by a lot to make sure that they fit him. And so this is circumference wise size 4.5, and then length and sleeve wise like way longer than what the pattern calls for. And so this took me 62 days to knit, and I finished it in September. And I knit this out of Hobby Amigo XL, which is the worsted weight version of Hobby Amigo. That's the same yarn that I knit my Oslo sweater out of, but that was the DK weight version. This I knit out of the worsted version. Amigo XL is about twice the weight of just Amigo regular. So my purpose of knitting my boyfriend this sweater is that he was going on a work trip to Copenhagen that I was going to join him for afterwards for like a vacation part. And Denmark is such like a knitting centric country that I thought it would be really fun to make him a sweater specifically for his trip. And so I cast this on, like I said, it took me 62 days to knit. So I actually cast this on in July, and then I finished it in September on the trip actually. So that was my purpose in making this for him. And unlike the Arctic Light sweater, this sweater does have short row shaping, so that was really, really nice. And I actually think in hindsight, now that I've completed it, I think that the short rows would be enough short rows for a female body, but for him with his bigger shoulders as a man, I think that he probably would have benefited from a little bit more short rows. And so if you are thinking of making this pattern for a man, I recommend fiddling with that or considering doing that, adding more short rows than the pattern even calls for. But that is one nice thing about this pattern, is that it does have short row shaping in it compared to the Arctic Light sweater, which although I really, really like that pattern, it does not have short rows. So this pattern does have short rows, and I really went in waves of motivation with this project. As you can see, it's a lot of cabling, and it's a lot of the same cables over and over again, mainly those honeycomb cables, but you have to, there are very, very few stitches in each cable, and so it's a lot of cabling for every single cable row. And so there'd be times when I'd get kind of sick of it, and then I would move on to a different project. I mean, like, but that's one of the benefits of having multiple projects at once. So I'd go in waves of motivation, but there was definitely waves where I really wanted to work on this, and I was having a lot of fun doing the cabling. And I did all of this cabling with a cable needle, but I am very interested in learning how to cable without a cable needle, especially for something like honeycomb cables where you're moving so few stitches. I think if I was moving a lot of stitches, like 6+ or something, that I would definitely want my cable needle there. But I am interested in learning and teaching myself how to cable without a cable needle. So if you have any recommendations for either videos that are good to teach to learn how to do that, or if you know how to cable without a cable needle and you have any sort of recommendations, I would love if you would leave that down in the comments so that I can learn how to do that. But yeah, this is a lot of cabling because I was knitting such a large size compared to what I normally knit for myself, and then also the lengths took so long. So I think that honestly, like 62 days to knit this when I was also working on other things is really not that bad. Like I'm very happy with how long it took me to complete this project, and I'm obviously very happy that I was able to get it done in time for a trip, and so I was able to get some finished object pictures in front of the colored houses with this on, so that was really fun. I am very proud of this sweater, and I know that he likes it, and I think it looks really good on him, and so overall really happy with this project, even though it was a bit of a, it was a big thing to complete, and so I think this year I tend to like, I do like to knit him at least one sweater a year. I think this year I might just make him a basic raglan sweater, which will be really fun. I've knit him a zipper sweater before, and then when I very first started to knit, I made him a all over moss stitch sweater, but I didn't use very good yarn, and it turned out okay, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I kind of want to make him, so that one was a raglan, but now that I know a lot more, I want to make him another raglan. Like I might just take the Monday sweater pattern and then choose a size that would fit his bust circumference with probably less positive ease than the pattern calls for. The pattern calls for a lot of positive ease, but I think men's fashion has less positive ease than women's fashion generally for sweaters. So I would just pick a larger size than I would make for myself, obviously for him, but one that has less positive ease than the pattern calls for, and just use the Monday sweater to make a raglan sweater for him, and then obviously lengthen a lot the body and the sleeves. So I think that's what will be coming in 2025 for him. But successful project, and I got it done with my self-imposed deadline that didn't really matter, but I still got it done in time, so that was good. So my next finished object was also finished in September, and this is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit. And this took me 35 days to knit, and I knit it in Stylecraft Highland Heathers DK in the color Thrift, I believe. And you can see it's this really beautiful marl yarn that's like purple and blue, a bunch of different shades of purple, which purple is my favorite color, so that's why I picked this yarn. And I chose this really basic raglan pattern by Petite Knit to kind of like highlight how pretty this yarn is. And this was my mindless knitting while I had the Billie Pullover on my needles, and so when I didn't feel like cabling anymore, I could pull out my stockinette raglan sweater and knit on it. And by the time that I was knitting this Monday sweater, it had been a long time since I had knit just like a basic raglan sweater. It felt really good, really like comforting to knit a raglan sweater. And this pattern is really great. I knit size 1 on 4mm needles, which is the suggested size, and it has really great fit, honestly, is like the main thing about this pattern. The short row shaping in this pattern is amazing. There's like a huge chunk of short row shaping that helps with the fit, and just like most Petite Knit patterns, it is written really well. Another reason why I knit this is for the apple picking cow that Emily Curtis hosted this fall over on Instagram. So it was the first time I had participated in a cow, because I didn't have my knitting Instagram until about July or August of this past year. I started it because I started this podcast channel, and so I was able to participate in my first cow, and so it was just like a group message on Instagram. And so one of my goals of knitting this sweater was to knit it in time to go apple picking, and I think I finished it like a week before we ended up going apple picking here in New Hampshire, and so that was really fun. I did enjoy the process of knitting this sweater, and I actually go into a ton of detail about the process of knitting this sweater on a different video on my channel. I actually made a like knit with me video for this sweater where I take you through the whole process of every step, and so if you want just like more information than necessary on knitting the sweater, you can check out that video if you'd like. But my only negative thing to say about this sweater in general is that the yarn is actually surprisingly scratchy for most acrylic yarn. Like a lot of acrylic yarns are so soft and really like a lot softer than a lot of wool yarns, but there is like a little bit of prickliness to this yarn, which it ends up being okay because I'm never wearing this sweater next to complete skin. Like I have a shirt on underneath it, but I was a little bit disappointed in how it felt. It did get a little bit softer after I washed it, which was good. So I'm definitely not going to use Highland Heathers again for a project. However, I don't think that it's a Stylecraft, the brand of yarn Stylecraft issue, because this year I also knit another project in Stylecraft yarn, which is I'm going to get to in a moment. But yeah, I knit a cardigan in Stylecraft Special, which is a different yarn, but still by Stylecraft, another acrylic yarn that they make. So I don't think that the scratchiness of this yarn is due to that not being a good brand. I don't know why this is scratchy yarn, but just the specific yarn is kind of scratchy. So that's a bit of a bummer, but the pattern is really amazing, and it is definitely going to just be my go-to raglan pattern. I'm just, whenever I need to make a basic raglan sweater, I think I'm just going to pull out this pattern, and I plan to. So I really love the yarn combination that I used for my holly sweater, which is going to be the last sweater that I talk about today, which is fingering weight sock yarn and a lace weight mohair held together. So my plan is to make a Monday sweater out of that yarn combination in the new year. Probably whenever I feel like I need a raglan, that's what's going to happen. So definitely happy with this project, but even more happy with the pattern, and I plan to use it again. So my next finished object was also finished in September. So I finished 3 projects in September. Obviously they weren't all cast on in September, but I did cast off 3 different projects in September. So that was really fun. This is the Anais Sweater by Gregoria Fibers, and I actually test knitted this sweater. So this was my very first test knit, and it's a pretty fitted sweater that has that like contiguous sort of construction, and it has this really big hem to it, this really voluminous hem, and then a cable down the center, which just keeps it just interesting enough, but it's mainly stockinette, so it still goes by really quick. The gauge is also fairly big on the sweater. I believe it's 18 stitches for 10 centimeters, and I knit size 1, and with the not very much positive ease for this sweater, it flew by. And so I finished this in September, but it only took me 11 days to knit. It was absolutely the only thing I was knitting on in those 11 days, but it did only take me 11 days to knit, so it absolutely flew by. And I knit this out of 2 strands held together. I knit this in Hobby Amigo, and then also in Lamy Yarn Soft Sensations, which is that vegan mohair that I've mentioned earlier. I knit those 2 held together, so the gray that you see is the mohair, and then the kind of steel green blue is the Hobby Amigo, and I really love this color. I don't think it's something that I would have purchased online, but I actually got this yarn from Hobby in Denmark and then flew back with it, and so I was able to see the color in person, and I'm so glad that I was able to go to a hobby store while I was in Copenhagen so that I could get a better sense for how the colors are, because I do really love this color, and I think it would be a good one to hold on its own as just like a DK weight in the future. The other thing about the sweater is that the sleeves don't have any decreases in them until, I believe maybe there's some decreases at the very end before you get to the ribbing, but for almost the entire sleeve there's no decreases. And so the sleeve itself is not very big. It kind of goes along with the fittedness of the sweater. But so what that means is that it's fairly close to your arm the whole way, and then slightly less fitted when you get to the cuff than most sweaters, I think. So that leaves just like the tiniest bit of looking like a balloon-esque sleeve, but not so big that it's like in the way, and then you didn't have to do any decreases while you were knitting it. And so I really like how these sleeves look, and I really liked the process of knitting them, and so I would definitely be open to knitting another sweater that has sleeves like this, or maybe even like adding sleeves like this on different sweater design. Honestly, I think this would really mainly work if you are making a very fitted sweater, because if you don't add decreases to your sleeves for most patterns, you're just gonna end up with huge sleeves because of yoke depth, or like how much positive ease there is in the sweater in general. So if I was knitting another fairly fitted sweater, I would probably do this again. Or I could do something where if I want this kind of sleeve design, I could stop increasing. If I'm doing raglan increases, for example, I could stop increasing for the sleeves and then just continue with the increases for the body. And so then I would still get the suggested number of stitches on the body, but I would have smaller sleeves, and then I would be able to just not do any decreases on the sleeves and still get the same design. So in the end, I ended up very quickly with this sweater that I think is really, really adorable. And like I said, I test knitted this, and so I At the time that especially when I first made my knitting accounts, I really wanted to like dive into the community, and so I really wanted to test knit something, and so I applied to a lot of test knits when I first joined and got rejected from most of them, but obviously I got accepted to this one, and so I did like the pattern when I first saw it, but mainly what I was thinking was, okay, I would wear that sweater and I really just want to test knit, and so I applied for it. However, I don't think that this is the sort of pattern that I would honestly gravitate to if I wasn't also getting to test knit it. But I am so glad that I was able to test knit it, because I really love the finished object and how kind of like it's a little bit girly and it's a different design. It's a lot different of a design to the other sweaters I have. I don't have very many fitted sweaters. I definitely don't have any that have this like flared out hem. So I ended up with this really fun sweater in my wardrobe that fills the spot in my sweater wardrobe of a sweater that I don't have, that's not like anything else that I have at all. So everything really just worked out with this pattern, I think, and I really recommend it for you guys now that it's out. So my second to last project for the year that I'm going to talk about is my Esther Jacket by Petite Knit that I finished in October. And so this took me 16 days to knit, so it was really quick. And I knit this in Stylecraft Special DK, and that's a DK weight yarn, and I held it double because this pattern calls for an Aran weight yarn. And this ended up being my Rhinebeck sweater. I finished it like a few days before Rhinebeck, and if you're interested in hearing about my Rhinebeck experience, I did make a vlog about that, which I'll link here, so if you want to check that out, you can. And so you can see that this is a cardigan. They call it the Esther Jacket because it is so thick. So this is an open cardigan, and I put these these very pretty metal buttons on there that I got in Copenhagen, so that's very special. And this textured design, this diamond textured design, I think is so classic, and the color that I picked is very classic, I think. And so this makes this such a wearable piece. I throw it on all the time. I love wearing it, and I'm really happy with the length that I chose to knit this in. And I knit size extra small, even though that is smaller than what I would choose for my bust, because my gauge was much larger than what the pattern suggested. I believe the pattern is around 16 stitches, and my gauge I think maybe was 14 stitches, something like that, which probably contributed to how I knit this in 16 days. So really quick. And this diamond texture is obviously it's quite repetitive, and so you can memorize it fairly quickly, and it's almost like knitting stripes or something, where there's a very like distinct kind of like, not stopping points, but like landmarks where like, oh, I've finished an entire diamond, or I've knit halfway through the diamond where I'm at the longest part here. And so that made it really addictive, and you like really wanted to keep going to see the next motif. And so this had me like getting up early before work to work on. Had so much fun knitting this sweater, and I ended up making a couple kind of modifications because of my gauge things. One is that I wanted to make sure that my sleeves weren't going to be too big. The sleeves seemed really big in the pattern, and so I ended up following the pickup rate that's suggested in the pattern for the sleeves, but the number of stitches that I had on my sleeve was much smaller than what is suggested for even the extra small size. I think maybe like half the number of stitches or something, like quite a bit smaller. And so I had to do a little bit of fiddling with the pattern in order to get to still have this one motif that's on the sleeves line up the way that it's supposed to. And so I just took out some moss stitches in order to get that to happen. And it all worked out pretty good, so I'm happy with that. And then the other modification that I made is that this pattern calls for a ribbed button band, and I was really worried that because I knit with acrylic, I get a lot of cinching in when I do ribbing that I can't get out and blocking. Because I don't wet block my garments, and so I ended up picking up multiple sizes larger for the recommended number of stitches for the button band before I did the ribbed button band, so that I wouldn't get cinching. But I still wanted to pick up one of the suggestions for the sizes in the pattern so that my calculations for where the buttonholes would still line up, and so that ended up working out really well. However, in the future, I think I will just steam block a cardigan if I have to do a ribbed button band, because I only just a few days ago actually did steam blocking for the first time, because I had a gift knit that I wanted to steam block out a ribbed hem for, not a button band, but a ribbed hem. And I wasn't really sure how it was gonna go, but it worked really well, and it was very simple. I pinned it out and then steamed it, and it has stayed where I pinned it. So I think I no longer need to really be afraid of cinching in from ribbing, because if that happens, then I can just block it out the way that everyone else blocks out with wool, and instead I'll just do steaming instead of wet blocking, and I think I can still get the same effect. So that's really exciting. And I noticed that my garment dried really, really quickly, like within like 2 hours or something, before it was like completely dry. And when you wet block something, it can take like a day or multiple days in order to dry. So that's really convenient that you don't have to wait around for so long in order for your garment to be ready to wear. So this was an amazing sweater in terms of the knitting experience, following the pattern. And it was really fun seeing the texture just like come to life. The yarn was really, really squishy. So I really like that. And then the finished garment has been really well. So this is definitely in my top three finished garments for this year. And it really makes me want to knit just like a lot more cardigans, even though I really don't like knitting flat. But because this is texture, it's not like you're just purling a bunch. You're doing one texture on one side and then you're doing more texture on the other side. And so you're doing both knits and purls on like both sides of the work because of the moss stitch and everything. So that keeps it for a cardigan like a little bit more interesting instead of having to like purl for ages and ages on the wrong side, which can kind of get old. Purling's not like the worst thing in the world, but I do prefer the knit stitch over the purl stitch. So that kind of prevents me from knitting cardigans sometimes, even though I do find them so wearable. Like I have worn this so much. So I think I should probably knit some more cardigans, which I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but one of my 2025 goals is to learn how to steek. And so if I'm able to do that, I think that can really open up a lot of things for me where I can knit basically just a pullover and then cut it, and then I'll be able to knit in the round and still get a cardigan, which will be really, really fun. So this is a 10 out of 10 project, the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit. It took me 16 days and I finished it in October. So the final project that I'm going to tell you guys about today, I finished in November, and if you caught my most recent podcast, this was my finished object in that podcast, so I talked a lot about it there. But it is the Holly sweater by Pernilla Larsen, which is the designer for Knitting for Olive. And as you can see, this is a circular yoke sweater that has a band of color work that looks like hollies. I knit size 1 and it took me 20 days to knit, and I finished it at the very end of November, so that I've been wearing it all December, which has been so fun. And I knit this out of 2 yarns held together. I knit it out of a fingering weight sock yarn, so Cascade Yarn's Cherub Sock, which is about 50-50 nylon and acrylic blend. And then I held that fingering weight with a lace weight mohair, which is out of acrylic and polyester. That looks very, very similar to wool mohair. It gives that exact same look. And so I was able to get that classic DK weight gauge by holding a fingering weight strand and a lace weight strand together. And it has resulted in this really, really light, but really, really soft and actually surprisingly warm, even though it's just acrylic, very, very warm sweater. So the feel of the sweater is just amazing, and it's so light. And I really think that this Christmas motif is so adorable. It is just Christmassy enough to be so festive, but not so in your face Christmassy that it feels kind of like silly to wear. Like I love wearing this, and I'm filming this before Christmas, even though I think this is going to come out after Christmas. And so I still have some more days that I'm going to wear this. So I'm planning on wearing this we're going to go to the Nutcracker ballet before Christmas. And then of course I'm going to wear it on Christmas Day. So this is it has been getting a lot of wear this December, and it's about to get a ton more wear. So this is my first time doing 3 color stranded color work, and it took a lot of attention. Even though it was definitely very engaging and a lot of fun, but it took a lot of attention. I would say like 60% of the time spent on knitting the sweater was just the color work, and then the other like 40% was the rest of everything else. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're choosing to knit the sweater. Like obviously it's going to take longer than just like a stockinette sweater because of this band of color work. But it's really, you just have to focus for one section, and then you can move on. So it's not like you're having to like really focus for the entire sweater. This sweater just brought me like so much joy to knit it. I had been planning on knitting the sweater for Christmas in 2023, but just ran out of time. And so this has really been on my queue for like over a year by the time that I was knitting it. So it was like well overdue for me to knit this sweater that I've been like dreaming about for so long. And then I was able to just like absolutely fall in love with this yarn combination of the fingering weight sock yarn and the lace weight mohair held together, which I believe I mentioned already that I'm planning on doing a Monday sweater out of that combination. So I honestly think I'm gonna do these same colors too. So this is a white. The main color, the main body here is knit in a white sock yarn and then a beige mohair held together, which I think brings a really cool cream color, like just mottled enough, but not super in your face. Like it's a nice oatmeal, I think. So I really like that. So that's definitely in the plans for 2025. So yeah, basically I just think this is like a perfect Christmas sweater. I'm really happy with this project. And so that was finished in November. Like I said, it took me around 20 days. So this is my last finished object that I'm going to discuss today, because the rest of November and December has been a bunch of gift knitting, one sweater, and a bunch of accessories. If you're curious about the one other sweater that I knit for gift knits, I did talk about it in my most recent podcast, so I'll link that here again. But I've also been making a bunch of like socks. I made one cowl for a family member for Christmas, and so that's what the rest of the year of knitting has been like. So this was the last thing I knit this year for me. So that brings us to the end of all the objects I was going to talk about. So I'm going to finish off with just my final thoughts on my year in knitting. I think my top 3 favorite sweaters from this year were the Porcelain Sweater, and then the Esther Jacket, and the Holly Sweater that I just finished. Maybe that's because those are fresh in my mind, but as of right now, when I'm thinking about my year knitting, I think those are my top 3 favorite sweaters that I made. Not necessarily in order, but I really, really liked those projects. Clearly, I think I've called like every sweater a great sweater except for the Cardigan No. 6, so like obviously I have gotten a lot of joy out of all of the sweaters, but I think those would be my top 3 if I had to pick them. And then I think my favorite yarn from this year is Hobby Amigo, and then Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock, and the Lamy Yarns Soft Sensations are my top 3 yarns from this year all together. And so I have had just so much fun this year knitting every single day, and it's really been something that I have been able to kind of like fall back on and rely on for comfort and relaxation at the end of every day. In the evenings is mainly when I do all my knitting, and so I'm really grateful for what knitting has been able to be for me this year. Obviously so much so that I wanted to make a channel to talk all about it. And so I think it has really been a positive thing in my life that in 2024, I especially really dove into. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing that trend in 2025. My general goals for 2025 in knitting is that I really want to learn how to steek, and I want to learn how to do brioche. So those are the 2 kind of big skills in knitting that I've yet to learn, and so I think I want to tackle those in 2025. Probably not at the same time. I'm guessing I'll do steeking first, because I could do like a really thick colorwork sweater and turn it into a cardigan in the winter, and then it would be cold enough for me still to be able to wear it. So I think maybe the first thing I'll try is steeking, and then look into doing some sort of brioche or half fisherman's rib, that kind of thing. So those are my goals for 2025. I've had a lot of fun making the podcast this year. I started it in August, and so that has been definitely a whole nother hobby in itself, honestly, the video making. So that's also a new thing that I started in 2024. So if you have anything specific that you would love to see in 2025 from my channel or from me, please let me know in the comments. I would love to talk about it. I have been discussing with my good friend Lene of Black Dog Knits of perhaps doing a knit along in early of 2025 for the Staff and Sweater by the Crayaband. So if you're interested in participating in that, also please let me know in the comments, because depending on the interest, I think will depend on whether we actually host that. It probably would be a very casual thing, group message on Instagram. Maybe we would do some prizes at the end, I'm not sure. But that is definitely something in discussion, because we both want to knit that sweater, and I think it would be really fun to do all together. So I hope that you had a very happy holiday, and that you enjoyed a lot of knitting this year and are looking forward to knitting in the new year. That is definitely how I am feeling. So with that, I'm going to send lots of big hugs to everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.